Well, joining me now, American Federation for Children CEO Tommy Schultz. Tommy, thanks for being with us today. A lot of questions for you, but let's start with the most important one. This policy by the president does absolutely nothing to address the underlying problem of college costs skyrocketing.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. And let's take a step back and look at the history of this, right? I mean, from 1965 to 2000, we accumulated about $500 billion worth of student loans. Then to 2007, we're up to $1 trillion. Now it's close to $2 trillion. This did nothing to actually solve that underlying problem. You know, you might even think, oh, this is a Band-Aid to that, for the solution. Essentially, it wasn't. It just threw more gasoline onto it. And let's take a real bigger step back when you actually think of the trade-offs here. One of my favorite economists, Thomas Sowell, he says, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. Think of what we could have done with all of that money. If we actually wanted to tackle the real issues in education, think of how much we could have done in terms of school choice. We could have fully funded school choice for basically every single American family this year. And I think about what does that mean for the future of America, throwing more gasoline onto this fire, which is our federalized student loan system, or what about if we made a total vector change in our education funding writ large by funding students, not the system, in our K-12 system?
Love Thomas Sowell, great economist, talks a lot about incentives, Tommy. You think about this, so you forgive debt for students right now, or those who hold the debt. Every single future college student is going to say, my debt needs to be forgiven as well. The temptation is going to be too strong. Doesn't that lead us eventually to a complete takeover of higher ed by the federal government? Because the call's simply going to be, we want them to pay for it all.
Sure. I mean, the federal intervention into our student loan system has already caused so much of the problem here, right? I mean, what incentives do colleges have to actually reduce costs, right? I mean, they're already getting the federalized student loan check that comes in and cashes. Now we've just created this bigger incentive, that kind of moral hazard that you were getting at, to really just keep continuing to increase costs. Certain governors, certain great college administrators and boards of trustees, regents, you name it, they've been controlling costs at the state level, but boy, this is just pouring even more gasoline into this dumpster fire.
Well, think about these colleges for a second. So the top 10 universities in America in terms of endowment have endowments worth more than $200 billion, Tommy. It's those universities that are going to benefit from this forgiveness because it's their students who are going to walk in saying, well, I can pay even more now because the government's forgiving my loans. This is a handout to the very institutions that have driven this problem. And yet the administration is acting like it's help for the little guy. It's not. It's help for people right at the top, Tommy.
No, that's totally right. And I mean, guess what? If you don't have student loans because you didn't get to go to college or you already paid off your loans like you were talking about in the earlier part of the segment, if maybe any other situation where you don't have student loans, guess what? You have them now. We've just basically made this huge transfer of student loans to the broader class of folks who are working hard, trying to pay these off. And again, my main point with all of this is at the front end, we didn't even solve the real problem here, even attempt to solve the real problem. Randy Weingarten, the head of the major schooling union out there, tweeted out a video saying, well, the reason we got to be doing this is because some college kids are too dumb and they made a bad choice of taking on these loans. Well, why is the federal government writing unlimited checks to students that after all their years in K through 12, they didn't get enough financial literacy because the vast majority of our students can barely do reading and writing at grade level by the time they're graduating college? And what are we doing to lower income families who would like to maybe get access to a higher education, but because of this cartel, this monopoly we have across our K through 12 and higher education system, we're not even giving lower income families that first opportunity to get up the ladder here because we are blocking their opportunities with zero school choice in so many different states.
Yeah, let's talk about this because good college choices start with a good high school education where you're learning how to make good choices, where people treat you like an adult and expect you to act like an adult. And I love that you brought up school choice. It's all about money here. And we live in a system right now where money follows the system. Money follows the union. Money doesn't follow the kid. Do you see that changing because of all the carnage we've seen in that system over the past several years?
Oh, absolutely. Over the past 2 years, we've been at the forefront of trying to pass these student-centered policies that you talked about. We're trying to fund the student, not the system at K through 12, because I mean, our education system, whether it's K through 12 through higher ed, has just been a disaster at delivering real outcomes. And when we're talking about spending $750 billion per year in K through 12, more than $15,000 per student, and 24 states over the past 2 years have essentially expanded school choice programs that are giving families access to private schools, to charter schools. That's going to be the real vector change that we need to actually improve America, our GDP, our global standing, you name it. Throwing, a few $100 billion at student loan cancelizations, which is essentially just transferring wealth from one person to the other. One of my friends said today, it's like, hey, I don't want the Amazon driver who's delivering the package basically paying for the loans of the person they're delivering the package to. I mean, it's just outrageous what we're doing. Everything in our education system, higher ed and K through 12 is just totally backwards. Hopefully we can fix it by funding the student, not the system in particular.
Give a fraction of that money to parents with students in high school. Let them choose schools that actually do the work of educating their kids. And I'll tell you what, that would go a long way to fixing all this. Tommy, we got to leave it there. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.